You think you know this house. You've seen it in photographs, in the news, in movies. White columns, manicured lawns, the American flag waving in the wind. But what you see is merely a facade, a mask, because the real White House is an iceberg, 90% of it forever hidden from outside eyes. This is not simply a building, it is a living organism that breathes history, guards secrets, and continues to change right now as you listen to these words. To understand how the heart of global power truly beats, we must journey back 233 years ago into the mud, literally. August of 1790. George Washington stands on the banks of the Potomac River, gazing at a swampy lowland. Mosquitoes swarm, the heat is oppressive, humid air steals the breath from his lungs. His advisors grimace. But Washington does not see a swamp, he sees a capital. He sees a palace that does not yet exist, and he makes a decision that will alter history, right here. This was a political choice as much as a geographical one. The location sat precisely between the northern and southern states, a physical compromise between two halves of a young nation that even then barely got along. Washington understood the capital must belong to everyone and to no one in particular. In October of 1792, without a single machine, without an excavator, without a crane, only by hand, the first earth was turned. Imagine it, thousands of people with shovels and wheelbarrows digging the foundation for a building meant to stand forever. Architect James Hoban, an Irishman by birth, won the competition for the best design and received a modest $500 and a gold medal for his work. His inspiration was Leinster House in Dublin, the mansion of Irish dukes. No one knew then that this man would return here again to rebuild from ashes what he himself had constructed. The first stone was laid by Freemasons in strict secrecy, without extra witnesses, with rituals whose meaning remains debated to this day. And here's what is astonishing. No one knows for certain where that first stone actually lies today. It is either sealed somewhere within the foundation or was lost in the fire of 1814, the first stone of America's first house, and it has simply vanished. This house was built by everyone, absolutely everyone. Enslaved people rented from local owners, their names barely recorded anywhere, but their labor is literally embedded in every stone. Immigrants who arrived from Europe seeking a better life, local workers experiencing for the first time the privilege of building something that would enter history. Every inch of foundation was wrested from the earth by human sweat.
Stone was brought from Aquia Creek in Virginia, a special kind of sandstone. Soft and porous, it carved easily but proved incredibly heavy to transport. Workers loaded it onto barges and floated it downriver. Some stones sank, others shattered. Construction was slow, exhausting, unpredictable. For delicate work, Scottish stonemasons were brought in, the finest craftsmen of their trade. With simple hand tools, they carved every flower, every curl, every ornament on the building's facade. This took months, years. Look at the White House facade today. Every decorative element was shaped by human hands, without templates or machines. To prepare lime mortar, workers burned oyster shells by the thousands, by the tens of thousands. Acrid smoke hung over the construction site. An unbearable stench filled the air. Temperatures at the kilns were so intense, men lost consciousness. This was hell in the middle of a swamp, but the house grew. By 1795, the largest stone house in America began to take shape. In a country where most people lived in wooden huts, this building seemed alien, a giant among ants, a dream made manifest in stone. But hidden within the stone lay a wooden soul. The entire interior framework of the building was wood. Beautiful, perfectly fitted, noble timber, but wood nonetheless. And this decision, made in the 1790s for practical reasons, turned the structure into a ticking time bomb. No one knew it yet. For waterproofing, workers poured molten lead into gaps between stones to keep rain from seeping inside. Those handling the lead knew nothing of its toxicity. No one did then. It was the best technology of its time, slowly killing those who applied it. Window glass was a true luxury. Most was shipped from Europe across the Atlantic on wooden sailing vessels, and roughly half shattered en route, from the ship's rocking, from careless packing, from the inevitable accidents of a long sea voyage. What arrived intact in Washington was nearly miraculous. And the plaster covering the walls resisted cracking thanks to one secret ingredient: horsehair. Mixed with lime and sand, the fibers created a reinforcing mesh that prevented the finish from crumbling. A simple solution, brilliant and completely forgotten today. The grand staircase was nearly complete by 1798. Majestic, wide, designed for kings, but intended for a president, a distinction Washington considered fundamental.
November 1st, 1800. Paint on the walls was still wet. Drafts whistled through the pipes. Corridors echoed with cold air. President John Adams moved into his new home and discovered that of 36 rooms, only 6 were truly livable. The rest existed only on paper. Walls present, windows present, floors present, but impossible to inhabit. His wife, Abigail, was a practical woman with no patience for illusions. She hung the family laundry to dry right in the enormous East Room, a space meant for state receptions, but in reality a cold, empty cavern. This room would remain unfinished for another 20 years. Food was cooked over open flames. Water was carried bucket by bucket from outside by hand because plumbing did not exist. There were no light switches, no central heating. At night, the house became a frozen stone box, illuminated only by candlelight. George Washington, who never lived in this house, though he had chosen and built it, dreamed of oval rooms. His logic was simple and elegant. In a room without corners, there is nowhere to hide. A guest is always in view. No dark corners for intrigue. This idea materialized in the Blue Room, an oval heart of the White House, where presidents to this day receive official guests. And finally, why is the house white? Many believe it was an aesthetic choice, a symbol of purity or triumph, but the truth is more prosaic. The porous sandstone from Aquia Creek absorbed moisture like a sponge. Without protection, it would have crumbled within years. So the surface was coated with a thick layer of lime whitewash, not for beauty, but for survival. The white color was a practical solution, though admittedly it turned out beautifully. In 1801, Thomas Jefferson moved in and immediately began remodeling. Jefferson was a man of science, an inventor, a technophile obsessed with new ideas. For him, the White House was not merely a residence, it was a project demanding constant improvement. He added the first wings to the main structure. Today, we think of them as offices, but their original purpose was entirely different: storing ice, meat, wine, and other provisions. Essentially, they were enormous refrigerators and pantries attached to the house. Life in 1801 dictated its own priorities. In 1804, Jefferson engineered a revolution whose significance is hard to overstate. He installed the first indoor toilet in the White House. It sounds mundane, but consider this. Until that moment, the President of the United States, leader of the youngest and most ambitious nation on earth, had to venture into the garden at night, in any weather, in any season. That first toilet changed everything forever. By 1810, construction was declared complete. The house stood, majestic, monumental, already becoming a symbol. It had ceased to be merely a building and had become part of the land, part of history, part of America's very idea. 4 years later, they would burn it to the ground. August 1814. The War of 1812. British troops under Admiral Cockburn entered Washington with little resistance. American forces had retreated. The capital lay open to the enemy. Soldiers entered the White House and found a table set for dinner. First Lady Dolly Madison had fled so hastily that the meal remained untouched. According to legend, British officers sat down and finished it, then drank the president's wine, toasting King George. This was a deliberate demonstration of superiority, a humiliation carefully staged for history. Then they set fire to everything. Furniture, portraits, books, documents vanished in minutes. The wooden framework, that very structure builders had sealed inside stone walls 20 years earlier, became a furnace. The heat was so intense that windows in neighboring houses cracked from the thermal shock. Stone hauled with such difficulty from Aquia Creek began to split from the temperature. Flames were visible for miles. An unexpected downpour, almost mystical, arriving at the critical moment, halted the fire before it destroyed the stone walls. But inside, nothing remained. Absolutely nothing but scorched ruins and the smell of smoke that had seeped into the very stone. When the fire died and people entered, they witnessed something beyond description. The walls stood, the stone shell had survived, but fire's traces, black soot stains embedded deep in the sandstone's pores, could not be washed away. No brush, no solution could remove them. The stone remembered the fire. And so they made a decision that would forever alter the building's appearance, paint everything white, not for beauty, to hide the scars. It was in this moment, in 1814, after the fire, out of necessity to conceal war's wounds, that the White House was officially born as we know it today. James Hoban, the very architect who had built it 20 years earlier, returned to rebuild his creation from ashes, and he made a decision that puzzles historians to this day: reconstruct the building exactly as it had been, wall for wall, room for room, and again a wooden framework inside a stone shell. The same construction, the same ticking time bomb. After the fire, the house began changing faster. President Monroe transformed it from a functional dwelling into a true palace, with French furniture, gilding, mirrors, and an elegance previously absent. The White House ceased merely to exist. It began to impress.
Real gates and guards appeared, the first genuine security system. The Blue Room finally received its ceiling, a crown for the building's most important space. In 1817, the first communication system arrived, a pull cord in the dining room that, when tugged, signaled the kitchen to bring coffee. Cutting-edge technology for 1817. In 1818, the first proper driveway was built for the president. By 1824, the famous porticos appeared, those curved colonnades supporting the balcony 9 meters above ground. Builders knew one wrong move during installation and tons of stone could collapse. Each block was placed with jeweler's precision. Gas lighting arrived, and with it, heavy air saturated with gas fumes that gave headaches to everyone living there. Then plumbing, then coal heating. The first West Wing, originally designed as a flower garden for the First Lady before becoming office space. In 1891, electricity entered the White House, but President Benjamin Harrison feared electrocution so deeply he simply refused to touch the switches. Servants turned lights on and off for him. Sometimes he went to bed with lights blazing simply because he dared not reach for the switch. It was around this time that the Oval Office received the Resolute desk, one of the world's most famous pieces of furniture. Carved from the oak timbers of the British Arctic ship HMS Resolute, trapped in ice and later rescued by American sailors. The ship was returned to Britain as a goodwill gesture. When it was decommissioned, Queen Victoria ordered a desk made from its wood, and gifted it to the U.S. president. A desk from a ghost ship given by an enemy as a token of friendship. It stands in the Oval Office to this day. By 1900, the White House had descended into chaos. President Theodore Roosevelt, a man of action who despised half measures, discovered he lived in a building that was simultaneously his home, office, museum, and public thoroughfare. Staff, journalists, visitors, children, dogs, all mixed in one space. Roosevelt made a decision: separate home from work. Construction began on a new wing for the executive staff. It was conceived as a temporary solution, a small building to stand a few years until something permanent arose. This temporary bridge between home and work still stands today, more than 100 years later. We know it as the West Wing. But the real problem wasn't crowding. The house was dying. By 1927, it became obvious something was catastrophically wrong. The roof, the very one installed after the fire of 1814, had rotted through. Beams sagged dangerously. Walking the upper floors became Russian roulette. Inspectors concluded the roof could collapse at any moment. It was a death trap.
The old roof was torn down and replaced with steel trusses, the first true metal framework in the building's history. This immediately added 50% more living space, transformed the interior, and finally made the house genuinely fireproof. Outside, nothing changed. The same silhouette, the same white shell. Inside, a completely different building. December 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. America entered World War II, and the White House suddenly became a prime target for enemy bombers. Under cover of darkness, while the public was told new administrative buildings were rising, workers began digging beneath Washington. A secret project, the Presidential Emergency Operations Center, PEOC, a bunker capable of withstanding a direct bomb hit. A 760-foot tunnel, over 200 meters, connected the East Wing to the Treasury Department's basement, an evacuation route for the president, unknown even to most White House staff. In 1942, the first bulletproof glass was installed. Windows were covered with blackout curtains to prevent the building from glowing at night and serving as a navigation beacon for enemy aircraft. Washington plunged into darkness. But the greatest threat came not from outside, but from within. 1948, President Harry Truman lived in a house that by all calculations should not have been standing. Stone walls were pulling apart under their own weight. Floors vibrated when trucks passed nearby. Ceilings sagged ominously. The house was literally sinking, slowly, inexorably descending into the very swamp on which it was built. Then came the final straw. A piano in one of the second-floor rooms began falling through the floor. One leg punched through the boards and dangled in mid-air above the first floor. Had they not acted quickly, the grand piano would have crashed down. The White House was officially declared unsafe. The president moved to the nearby Blair House. What historians call the Great Gutting began. The solution was radical. Demolish the building completely? Impossible. The stone shell had become too important a symbol, too woven into national identity. But leaving it as is meant the president to live in a structure ready to collapse. So they did something astonishing. They kept the stone walls, only the walls. Everything else, floors, ceilings, joists, interior partitions, parquet, everything 150 years old was hauled outside. A bulldozer was driven right into the gutted building, into the space where the Red Room once stood, where Abigail Adams had hung laundry, where Dolly Madison had received guests. Then they drove piles down to bedrock, the very rock lying deep beneath Washington's swamp, poured a reinforced concrete foundation, erected a new steel framework right inside the old stone walls, a building within a building, a new house in an old shell. They added modern plumbing, ventilation, electricity, emergency evacuation routes, reinforced the bunker, installed new security systems. 4 years of work, $6 million, and in 1952, the White House reopened its doors with the same white shell outside and an entirely new interior within. Today, this house looks as it did in 1800, feels as it did in the 1950s, but technologically, it lives in the future. Beneath the parquet floors of the press briefing room, where journalists from around the world stand daily, directly under their feet lies an old swimming pool built by Franklin Roosevelt for polio rehabilitation. They didn't demolish it, they simply covered it with wooden planking when Nixon converted the space into a briefing room. Somewhere deep in the basement exists the Situation Room, the nerve center created after the Cuban Missile Crisis, where the president receives real-time intelligence, the place where world-changing decisions are made. The house has become energy efficient with solar panels, heat recovery systems, smart grids. It can feed 200 people at a state dinner. It serves as a global communications hub, shielded against any cyber attack. It connects via tunnels to other government buildings, and people still live here, with their joys, fears, family dinners, and children's laughter echoing through corridors. 233 years. Fire, war, rot, sinking. This house has died 5 times and been reborn each time, because it is not merely a building, it is an idea, and ideas do not burn. If you want to learn more about how the world's most complex and significant structures are built, subscribe. We are only just beginning.